Have you ever struggled while answering situational or behavioral interview questions? Questions like, tell me about a difficult stakeholder you recently handled. Tell me about a conflict within your team. What would you do if the development team is struggling to understand the requirements? Tell me about a situation where a requirement changed at the last moment. So for many candidates, these questions are actually more challenging than requirement gathering, agile, scrum, or documentation related question. The reason most candidates either become too generic in their response or try to create a story on the spot. And unfortunately, both approaches can hurt your credibility during the interview. So in this video, we are going to understand why interviewers ask situational and behavioral questions, the most common mistake candidates make while answering them, how to structure your response using STAR framework, and finally, we'll walk you through a real business analyst interview example so that you can understand how to convert a generic answer into practical and interview ready response that sounds very specific. Let's get started. Before we jump into the framework, let's understand something important. When an interview asks you a situational or behavioral question, they are usually not testing your theoretical knowledge. They are trying to understand whether you have experience working on the similar scenarios or not. And that is where this is very, very important to give them a real understanding whether you have faced those scenarios in the past or not. Now, let me talk about the biggest mistakes I have observed. Many candidates give answer like, I would talk to stakeholder, I would arrange a meeting, I would communicate with the team. Now, technically, these answers are not wrong, but they are too generic to consider. The interviewer is unable to understand whether you are speaking about experience or simply saying what sounds correct. At the same time, some candidates go to other extreme. They start explaining every single detail of the project. The stakeholder's name, the exact date when you started, the exact meeting, the name of the deliverable, the exact timeline. Now that interview is already lost. So the goal is not to be very generic. Similarly, the goal is not to be overly detailed. The goal is to be specific enough that interviewer feels, yes, this candidate has genuinely handled this situation before. This is where STAR framework become extremely useful. STAR stands for situation, task, action, result. Instead of jumping directly into the solution, you're talking to the interview through this process. Let me show you with an example. Suppose the interviewer asks, your development team is struggling to understand the requirement. There is a lot of back and forth discussing, resulting in frequent spillover. As a business analyst, how would you handle this situation? Now, instead of saying, I would talk to development team and clarify the requirement, which again sounds very, very generic, let's answer this using STAR method or STAR framework. This is how the ideal response look like. I experienced a similar situation in one of my recent projects where development team was frequently reaching out for clarifying during development. This was creating delay and eventually resulting in spillover. As the business analyst, it was my responsibility to identify the root cause and ensure that development team had sufficient clarity before starting the development. So after analyzing the issue, I observed that although requirements were documented, the level of detail was not sufficient for the development team. So to address this, I started incorporating wireframe and more detailed acceptance criteria into requirement. I also started conducting requirement walkthrough session before development began so that the issues can be identified proactively. As a result, the number of clarification discussion reduced significantly. The development team had better understanding of requirement and we observed fewer spillover compared to previous releases. I hope now we can compare what is the difference between a practical, specific response emerging from STAR framework. And the next time you're preparing for BA interview, don't try to memorize answer. Instead, think about situation you have already experienced in your project and then structure those experiences using the STAR framework. And if you have faced any interesting situational or behavioral question during your interview, which you are not able to respond, let me know in the comment section. And if you're looking for more practical business analyst interview preparation content, consider subscribing to this channel. I will see you in the next video.